Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews. This week we take a look at obviously another film from our past. Chris chose this one. I'm not trying. That sounded like I was putting blame on him. Sorry. Let me.
Really did.
Yeah, I didn't mean that one. I did not mean that to sound like that way. I was like, I'll fit that information in, and then I thought I don't know physically how I get this into the sentence, so it felt really forced in, which made it sound like I was putting blame on Chris. This was Chris's choice. He chose 10 Things I Hate About You to sort of go a different route because he's done a lot of kids films or family films. And then, to balance that, Chris thought, let's do a film where absolutely every single adult in this world is a monster.
So one of my favourite elements of the most strike, sometimes like in these rewatches, you watch something and pick up on something you'd never really had before.
Yes.
And one of my favourite elements of this film is now what they do with the adults.
Yeah, it's incredible. We'll come back to it. But so, I mean, we usually start with sort of our history with the film. It's an interesting one for me this week because I have literally never seen this film. And I explained on the last podcast, but I'll very briefly recap. The reason I never saw this film is because I was too young to see it in the cinema, I believe. And oh no, it got a 12 in this country, didn't it? Because they cut out the knife thing. You know the switchblade thing?
Yeah.
They cut that out and got a 12 somehow.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Anyway, that's trivia for later, I guess. Well, I've said it now, so it doesn't really need to be. But yeah, they cut that scene out and got it down from a 15 to a 12 in the UK. Apparently, it was still removed from UK versions until it came out on DVD. And then the 15 rating was restored.
That's not a bad move. Like, I think getting rid of that scene to make it more open.
Yeah, and I don't even think they cut the whole scene. I think they literally cut the knife bit.
Cool.
So there you go.
Yeah, I don't.
Anyway,
although I watched on video, I think, so maybe it was already 15 by then.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway,
you have to check whether your copy has a 12 or a 15 certificate. Anyway, moving on. So I never saw this film because basically there was a big fad following. I didn't see it initially when it came out, just either through lack of awareness or whatever. But then American Pie happened, and then I assumed all American teen movies were just going to be American Pie. And I don't have that much love for American Pie. I think American Pies get a little overrated. I think it was just right place, right time, American Pie. It was just that sort of weird, sort of like teen gross out humor, you know, at a time when that was just like what people were after. You know, it's the reason Jackass was successful, you know, and so I'm as guilty as anyone because I really loved Jackass as a kid. In fact, at one point we should do Jackass the movie because that was ridiculous. Anyway, so I never saw this film. So the first time I ever watched this film was yesterday. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. But let's go into your history because you chose this film, Chris. So I'm assuming that you have some sort of link or connection to this film beyond having seen it.
Not one I remember concretely, but I certainly remember two occasions watching it. I remember watching it with my childhood girlfriend, who, you know, I'm still kind of, we chat occasionally. Still, I don't know why. This podcast isn't me justifying or explaining my relationship with each of my ex-girlfriends, but with this particular one,
that's our new podcast coming up this year.
Let's get him in for interviews.
It's called the GF reviews, and we'll go through. Chris basically, you know, goes through each of his girlfriends one by one. Talks about why the relationship imploded. He talks about the after. So each episode is one of his relationships, and it's how it started, then sort of how it how it went on, how it ended, and then at the end he talks about his sort of status with them now. It's not got the longest run of a podcast. You know, well, I suspect we've got more episodes we could potentially do of this than that. I'm quite excited for it.
I was at one point like toying with the idea of writing like a short film series about that exact premise because it's the kind of premise you could do in one room. Only the guy would be it was called Interviews with My Ex-Girlfriends. And the idea would be the guy would interview a different ex-girlfriend every week, and it would be, you know, it was kind of loosely based on my own situation. There were a few that he was friends with. There were some, you know, not so much friends with. But yeah, I never got around to writing it down.
You know what you should do?
And now I can't, because if I write it now, you're gonna claim it's your idea. So
No. You know what you should do. You
What?
should write it as a podcast.
yeah,
And-
well, that's what
and-
I was kind of toying with. Yeah.
Yeah, write it as a podcast script and don't film it. Just voice record it with various actresses, and then you release it that way.
Yeah, but so you never know. That might randomly pop up on it. But so yeah, I have a lot of. But this is moving away from fictional.
Sorry,
exes
yeah.
and
I went on a
Um,
comedic tangent that's turned into a legit thing, and that I didn't want that to happen. I was just making fun. Like, yeah, Chris is gonna talk us through his girlfriends, but okay.
No, but I tell you what. But in all seriousness, I think to some degree, because I remember watching this film with her, and then I think I borrowed the video of her, or I had the video or recorded it, and I do remember like watching it subsequently, like on my own and stuff. And I think there is an element of because that particular girlfriend, it wasn't a bad breakup. We were together for 4 years. We, before uni, we went right. Well, this, fine, and we parted ways. And I have an awful lot of affection for that person. There was no drama. There was no, bad ending. It was lovely, and she was lovely. And maybe in my head that when I think of this film, I picture watching it with her, and there is a wave of affection. So that's, I think, potentially my history with the film, but it gets a little hazy to remember I don't remember a specific moment. I remember watching it at hers, I remember watching it at mine, and I remember having a VHS copy of it that was someone's floating around somewhere. And I remember the song as well became like a big... I remember like having that I Want You to Want Me, the Letters to Cleo version. I remember like legitimately I have that song still on my phone because it's like on my iTunes. I bought it and stuff, so it's on my Apple Music and whatever. Then I'll occasionally bust it out, and I remember that as well. And I remember the song being played at parties and stuff like that. So yeah, and obviously the Heath Ledger stuff, that scene, especially the singing scene, sort of the iconography of that became a bit of a thing when he passed. I remember that clip. And I think for some people, like, it felt like for everyone it was The Dark Knight, and then for some people they would think of Knight's Tale, and some people would think of this. And like, obviously Brokeback Mountain, he's got a wave of work, but there definitely felt like there were people remembering and talking about this.
Yeah,
which I remember as well.
Yeah, there was. I mean, it's amazing. Like, because so I don't think I ever saw Knight's Tale more than the once, and I don't think I knew who he was when I saw it. I didn't see Brokeback Mountain until much later, and didn't see this. It's a bit weird because for me, when they announced Heath Ledger playing Joker and everyone was kicking up a huge fuss, I did not understand because I was just like, I don't know the dude. Why are people upset? Is he a bad actor? I don't understand. And I just kind of dismissed it because I was just like, it's Nolan. I'm sure he's figured it out. Like, whatever he's doing, he's got a thing. Like, I didn't really think too hard about it because I wasn't that familiar with Heath Ledger. It's really interesting to do the career in reverse because obviously since Dark Knight, I've seen Brokeback. I don't think I've ever gone back to A Knight's Tale, but now having sat down and watched this, I'm like, this is a really fascinating dude, and it's really clear that he's really talented. And it's really it's clear that he's above everyone else in this movie. And I don't mean to disparage any of the performers in this movie who are also actually exceptionally good. Julia Stiles particularly on fire, particularly in that last scene.
I think Julia Stiles matches him, but the reason you notice Ledger more is because Ledger's iconic roles. He's doing different things in all of them, and I think Julia Stiles is just as good in this. But there's an element of Julia Stiles is doing a similar performance to ones she's done elsewhere, which isn't a criticism.
I think she gets an elevated moment towards the end of this. Obviously, the moment in the classroom towards the end where she is like matching him and what he's been doing in this movie, but he does it top to bottom in this movie. There's something bizarrely fascinating about his performance choices the whole film. He's like weirdly sort of like. It's charisma. He's charismatic. That's what it is. But it's also that he's making really bold and interesting choices for that character every step of the way in terms of just little movements. like, yeah, I found it really fascinating to watch that and go, oh no, he was always brilliant. It wasn't like he got the Joker and he learned how to act. Like, he was
Yeah,
always incredible, and it just took a long time for
yeah.
anyone to realize it.
Yeah, and I think Brokeback, helped with that an awful lot as well.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, so should we move on just to discussing those while we're on, or do you want to do? Well, let me finish that point and then we'll do overall thoughts. I think both of them. What's so impressive about what for me both of them do is they, in the hands of lesser actors, that's not working because the characters in the script take turns. The characters, like, their opinion on things, their view on things turn. And if you had crap actors, I don't know if the script does enough to justify that and to make that work.
Yep.
But those actors absolutely do. Like, they make that work. You believe, if in the hands of a lesser actor, Ledger's speech to Joseph Gordon-Levitt at the party is coming out of left field. Julia Stiles' decision to reverse her opinion on multiple things and to do stuff that helps her sister by going to the prom and stuff is absolutely sold from her by her performance. And I think that's something that, to be fair, all the cast are brilliant, but I really noticed with those two that the charm they're putting into the roles elevates the movie.
It definitely does, and when we get to like the full description, I mean, you've hit on a big criticism I have of the film, which is on paper these characters make just weird shifts that don't make any sense or aren't justified in the script. But before we come to that,
let's do overview. Yeah.
Well, before we get to that very quickly, just a description, because somebody pointed out that we're not very good at reminding people what the plot of the film is. So I'm gonna get more of an effort to do that. For those who don't know or don't remember or haven't seen it recently, 10 Things I Hate About You is basically a modern adaptation of Taming of the Shrew. The characters' names are pretty much the same. They had to change Patricio because, of course, I mean, no one has that name, but Katharina is still there as Kat, and Bianca has not changed. They've not changed their name at all. The premise, I'm not as that's, to be fair, it's one of Shakespeare's works I'm less familiar with, so I'm not going to be able to sit here and analyze the differences in the way they've adjusted the plot. But in this film, the plot is basically that the lead character played by Heath Ledger. No, let's step back a second. So Kat is sort of very antisocial. She's kind of turned on society. Like, she's fed up of everyone. She's fed up of misogyny and like just the world, and has kind of become unpopular in school because she's always got a gripe about something. She's always, because she's sort of gone quite angry at everyone because of just societal stuff. So she's sort of downplayed by everyone in the school, and then her sister wants to start dating because there's this model guy that's an absolute arsehole that wants to date her, and she's kind of into him at first, I guess, because he's a good looking dude. But their dad, who they very cleverly give the dad a very clever profession to make this opinion make more sense, which is basically he's a gynecologist, so he sees. No, he's not a gynecologist, is he? What's he? He's like, he works on like a maternity
He delivers
ward.
babies.
Oh, he does. He delivers babies. He literally delivers babies. So he sees teen pregnancies all the time. So he's forbidden both of them to even date or even go to, like, he doesn't even want them to go to prom, which is crazy. Like, you can't deny your children going to prom. Like, that's crazy. But anyway, so the deal, he says, is when Kat, the older one, who he knows full well is unpopular and isn't likely to be caring about boys or going on dates anytime soon because she's shunning society, he says that once she starts dating, the younger sister Bianca can start dating too. When Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, who likes Bianca, finds out about this, they hatch a plot to try and get Heath Ledger's character together with Kat, so that he can date Bianca. But obviously the jock guy, the model guy, is also after Bianca. So they play that to their advantage and have him pay Heath Ledger's character to do it. You can immediately tell from the second that scene happens that that's going to blow up in someone's face at a later point in the film. And yeah, so it does. But yeah, that's why it starts. But of course, the rest of the film plays out with various relationships working their way out and people sort of figuring out how they actually feel about each other. And it's and you know what, Chris? Overall opinions, I pleasantly surprised. I thought I think it's a solid film. I think I totally think it holds up. It is aesthetically the most 90s movie I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Everything from the soundtrack to the costume design to the sets, it literally it's oh man, it's like someone found a button that says 90s filter and just put it over it, and everything from the music to the stylized letters at the beginning with the actors' names, like it's so 90s. I kind of love that. I love it for that. But even if you take that out of it, I think the script is relatively solid. I think the characters are even likable when they're unlikable. I think there's a real charm to the way this world. I think there's a really unique voice to it that that I can't really pinpoint like what that is. And then the performers are all fantastic too. You know, I did mention earlier Heath Ledger sort of stands out for the majority of the film. There's something magnetic about what he's doing, but I mean, everyone is doing something funny here, or something clever. I mean, Alison Janney plays a teacher with a really funny name. I've forgotten the character's name. The teacher,
Pesky or something. Pesky, something like that.
Yeah, Perky. Perky is is like the school counselor, but she's the worst. And like she's a lot of fun in this film.
She's writing a graphic novel whilst trying to chat to the kids. And
he doesn't mean graphic novel. He means erotic novel.
Yeah, sorry, erotic novel.
Yeah. She's not writing Watchmen, that's for sure. So yeah, there's a lot. The movie has a lot of fun with what it's doing, and while it is a little lazy in terms of the character turns, which is my biggest criticism of it. That actually isn't. I think it's softened by the acting, as Chris pointed out, even though it is still, it is still a valid criticism, but it is softened by the acting. Other than that, it's pretty solid.
And I think if you weren't watching it with a critical eye, you wouldn't notice. Like
I don't know. I could see somebody being like, I could see somebody thinking that felt like it was coming out of nowhere. Like, oh, when did she change her mind on that?
Yeah, well, the big thing is there's points where like it feels like scenes are missing. Like,
it does, yeah.
There's one moment where two characters, Bianca and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, whose name I can't remember. Like, kind of fight. She says to him, "When are you ever going to ask me out?" in French, and storms off.
Yeah.
And in the very next scene they're together, he's turning up on the doorstep because apparently he's asked her to prom. And I'm like, it's a weird decision to end one scene with the "why aren't you asking me out" anger, and then not show the asking out. Or maybe you could have, it was an opportunity for her to have gone, "Oh, I asked him," or do you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
but
structurally,
equally,
it's a bit all over the place.
But equally, so I really enjoyed it as well. I thought it was a really, like, just an enjoyable movie, basically. Thought it was really sweet, and
nothing groundbreaking though.
No, nothing like whoa, or anything like that.
But yeah, thoroughly. I did not begrudge sitting down for the hour and a half to watch it at all. I had a good time watching it. Yeah,
and what I think you hit the nail on the head with unique, voice or unique style, because they did one thing, despite the fact that there being occasions where it's like it feels like a scene's missing here. There are some elements that really made it feel cohesive and unique. So the visuals were often brilliant. There's a shot where it's quite amusing. They basically there's a flyer for a party which they just plaster the words "Three Booze" all over, and then they like drop the flyers from the top of the stairs, and you see from a low angle shot all these flyers fall and the kids catch it. There's some wonderful cinematography. I don't think we've ever brought this up on this podcast before, but the costumes, and they're incredibly 90s, but there's like subtle, like the prom dresses are really tailored towards their specific characters. They and also they subtly, with Bianca, there's the way she's dressed before and after she kisses, have you got this in front of you? What's Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character's name?
I don't have it for a minute. I can pull it up very
Okay,
quickly.
no,
I've got it. Hot tab somewhere. Bear with me.
That's fine. I'll let you find it. Cameron. His name's Cameron, I think.
Yeah, Cameron James. And Heath Ledger has gone from Patricio to Patrick. Cool. Patrick Verona, might I add. Oh, another Shakespeare reference snuck in there. Verona.
Nice.
Very good.
There we go.
Yeah, it's good. It's clever.
Like her character, he kind of calls her out on some of her bullshit. She realizes he's right, kisses him, and then the next scene, her costume, what she's dressed in, has changed, and it's like she's kind of subtly listened to him, and it's not something you'd necessarily notice. But I just thought there were loads of things like that, and also there's a few really good sight gags. One of my favorite is the idea is that the guy whose party they adapt to like be free booze and get everyone going.
Yes,
is a guy who's wronged one of the characters, and he's quite a like, I suppose the term they use in the movie, but like a do-well kid, like he's quite, meh, meh. And they're all in their kind of shirts, and he's getting really paranoid about people touching things. And then the doorbell goes, and I can't remember the character's name he references, but he says something like, "Oh, that'll be Alan with the brie." And then the door opens, and all these kids with booze and kegs like rush in. But at the front of that rush is a dude in a shirt and a jumper just carrying a plate of brie.
Oh, I didn't notice that. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. That's so good.
Fantastic. And then as well, they're really, as bizarre as it is that there are some scenes that feel like they're missing, there's also an attention to detail you don't necessarily get in a movie like this. The example of that I noticed.
You're right. I just pulled it up and looked at it. The guy, there's just a dude at the front in a shirt holding brie.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's great. That's brilliant. I had to see that for myself when you said it. That's genius.
It's a really great gag that, again, you just wouldn't necessarily notice.
No,
I
missed
add
it
these
completely.
Layers.
I completely missed it.
And gives it a depth that I think some of those other movies you mentioned don't have.
Well, because do you not feel like the people who made this cared? Like they wanted to make a good movie. It's funny, isn't it, how when you think when you watch some of those like American Pie cash grabby style movies that came out after American Pie, because I think American Pie, they were trying something. I don't think American Pie was cynical in nature when it was being made. It's not for me. But
no, I don't.
But I actually think the people making American Pie had good intentions.
Yeah,
they don't know what they started. They don't know what
I watched that film at the right time. I don't begrudge that film as much as you do.
Yeah, sure. So, no, I'm aware you're a fan. So, but I think the way the movies that followed that, though, there were a lot of like sort of cheap knockoffs that were made very cynically with money in mind, right? And I think that is indicative of the time, and just like, yeah, teens will fucking watch anything. Let's just put a few dick jokes in there, and they'll be right on board. A few dick jokes, bit of teen angst, some music from the best acts of the day, and no one will give a shit. And there's truth to that. People were watching those movies in droves, no matter what. We all saw Van Wilder 2: Rise of Taj.
Great movie.
So that's that, but it feels to me like these people want to make a good movie. Like so it's funny how you'll forgive little structural problems. Like my biggest like structural sort of flaw with the movie is that they have a fallout and rekindling twice. The main two, Kat and Patrick. It doesn't make any sense structurally to have the moment where she tries to kiss him and he doesn't respond, and also they never have him explain, "You were drunk, that didn't feel right," because that's the answer, which is
madness, because that makes you warm to the character, and you never get the moment where she realizes that.
Yeah. He never actually says to her, "Hey, I was making the choice." But anyway, so she falls out with him with that, which I thought was really clever and bold, because I was like, "Oh, that's the reason they're gonna fall out, not the money thing." Wow, that's clever. Like, I'm on board. It's always so stereotypical in these movies. You always know what the good breakup thing is going to be well ahead of the characters. So I was like, wow, that really surprised me. And then they got back together and then fell out again over the money. And I was like, no, don't do it twice. Let's do it once and do it really well. So,
Yeah.
but it's amazing though how when you feel like the creators were really trying something, you're so much more forgiving of small stuff like that. I think people nitpick more when and get more up in arms about like, smaller stuff that's not like affecting a huge percentage of the movie, just a portion of it, when they don't feel like the creator was behind it, like and actually trying to do
cared,
something
yeah.
interesting and cared. And it feels really deeply like the people making this movie gave a shit from top
Yeah,
to,
well,
top to bottom, like from the art design, set design, right through to the bloody editing and the acting and the like everyone was trying to really do something
Yeah.
special. And I will say that like even though it doesn't 100% work because we've noted a few pretty serious structural and flaws and weird character choices, like still like you totally forgive it that because it's kind of charming and it's got a unique voice, and on top of that like it seems like everyone gave a shit, and that is more than I can say for a lot of movies from this time.
The other example I was going to give backs that up as well. It's a little detail that's like I don't think I'd have even noticed unless I was looking at things, with a knowing we were going to talk about it for an hour. But there's the bit. So her favorite band plays the prom, and Patrick's character, she's like, "How did you what?" And he's like, "Oh, I called in a favor." And it's as if someone went, but the point of this is we've lessened the mystique. So, like, you kind of believe less that he'd call in a favour. And then I remembered that in the bar scene where that band are playing earlier in the movie, he seemingly randomly greets someone and is like, "Oh, hey!" And the person's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And it's just a small 2-second moment, but it basically in my head then later on when, oh, well, called in a favour. He knows, presumably, the owner of the bar or someone that works at the bar, so that's actually perfectly logical. The fact that they took the time to insert something that made that make sense is crazy. Like, films from this era didn't do that.
Yeah,
all the things you mentioned about costume and stuff.
Yeah, the other one I was just thinking of was the bit where I mean, we cut to the dad sat at home. I think it's on prom night later in the movie. And it cuts first to the TV he's watching, and it's the spray on like hair.
Yeah, the spray on
and
hair.
And then the camera just pulls slowly back in that one take. It pulls back over his head, and then it's like his head is framed in the foreground with this advert about spray on hair in the foreground. Yeah. And I thought that must have actually been a really hard shot to pull off. And they'd have had to get the trailer made and all that stuff for essentially an establishing shot. A lesser movie would have just gone, he's in his house watching TV. Now start the actual scene. Get to the whatever the point of the scene. I think that's the one where they come down and they're going to prom. I think it's the start of him being sat on the couch watching TV. So you could have just done that. He's sat on the couch, he's watching TV, he's completely disengaged. Cat comes down in the background. I'm going to the prom. Yeah, whatever. Like not realizing what was actually happening. But they didn't. They were like, "Oh, wait, can we cram in another gag? Can we do something else kind of funny?" And like, what effort do we have to go to make that work? Like that camera move was actually surprisingly complex because it has to go over him for that to work. So it's clearly a movie made with love, and it probably cost. I've got to imagine it probably didn't cost that much to make, but like they used what they had really well.
Yeah,
for sure,
definitely. As we kind of hinted at earlier, they really characterize like every character in this movie has something, and even the detail of giving the friends. So she's got a friend, and Cameron's got a friend. Cameron's friend is in it more, but they give them a storyline that's kind of sweet. Like every character has something, and that's what I was going to say. I was slightly worried at first because there's some really derogatory language used about some of the female characters, and I was like, "Oh shit, am I about to discover that this film doesn't age well?" And it feels a bit harsh in a modern context, as in the words feel harsh, not like it's a harsh thing to say. Like it takes you out a bit because you're like, "Ooh."
But are they not? I think are they to just not sever you, but are they not direct references to some of the phrasing used in Taming of the Shrew though?
I don't. Oh, possibly yes. Possibly
because I think at one point somebody calls her like like a bitch shrew or something like that, and I think that's because
I'm thinking of someone calls her virgin and slut. Not to use those terms, I apologise. Well, virgin obviously, but to use the word slut, I apologise. But those words are said by characters that by a character in particular that absolutely gets his comeuppance. And the actual message of the film is the guy that's a dick and not listening doesn't get the girl, and the guy who
Yes.
genuinely cares does. So you kind of go, by the end of it, I was like, oh, that terminology hasn't aged well, but actually the point of the film is arguably that,
Yes.
well, that character didn't win, that character didn't get the girl, that character is embarrassed, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and also I think, to be fair as well, I think the original Shakespeare play is often cited as like one of his most problematic. I think it's been.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
the original play this is based on has been labelled misogynistic, and quite controversial. Really, I think it's probably why it's not like taught at schools or anything like that, like some of his other stuff. I don't know anyone who did this one at school, and I think that's the reason. Like the premise from my understanding, 'cause I did a little bit of reading into it. Just to see, because it's not one of the ones I'm most familiar with at all. I know it exists. I know it's a Shakespeare play. Like I knew it was one of his comedies and that it was a vaguely romantic one, and I had a vague idea of the premise. But yeah, basically it's Patricia like has to tame the shrew, the headstrong one, rather than dating the ideal one, her younger sister. And he's trying to make the shrew a more desirable, compliant, and like obedient bride. Like, so he does things from like keeping her from eating and drinking. It's like psychological torment. Like it's a comedy, but it's like
Yeah, it's correct.
but it's quite misogynistic. Yeah, it's like it's so it's from my perspective, like I think it's interesting they managed to retell that story and not fall into the same traps. There's a couple of problematic stuff, like not too much, but I do think some of the forced kissing is weird. Like there are characters that like
Yeah, definitely.
very much launch into kisses that the other person would not welcome, and they do it in a way that means they can't escape. Because like usually in a movie, it's the slow lean in for the kiss, and someone gets the chance to turn away. In this, there's a lot of like sudden kiss attacks, which I found.
Yeah, that was a weird theme throughout the film. Like it happens on at least 2 occasions that I can think of.
Yeah, and then it's even a theme in the end credits the very problematic. Well, no, sorry. What initially seems very problematic. What's the word? The outtake, where Heath Ledger forcibly kisses the actress playing Cat, Julia Stiles, and then they're all laughing. I found out afterwards those two started dating on the set of this movie. So I'm gonna assume that happened before that happened. So it's okay.
Right.
Because otherwise, that's fucking weird.
Yeah.
What a great
Otherwise,
prank!
that puts
I forced myself upon you. Like that's not
that's...
that's not good. So because I thought some of those end scenes were quite charmingly funny, but like that one I did not enjoy. I was like, oh, that poor girl. And then I read afterwards they were dating. Yeah, they only dated for a year after the movie, but yeah, they were dating at the time. It seems so. Apparently Heath Ledger based his performance, actually on the Shakespeare thing. Apparently he based his some of his performance on Richard Burton's portrayal of the Patricia character in the 1967 adaptation, which I think was called Kiss Me Kate. So like Ledger was even doing crazy amounts of research back then.
Even for this, that we should talk about that, because the Shakespeare is very cleverly woven in that they, like as you said earlier, they sometimes literally use language used by Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm. Some quotes directly from the original. Some quotes directly from the original text as well. But
it doesn't feel. It just adds to that unique tone of voice. It doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't make you go, huh?
Yeah, and they weave it in a way where they've got They also find an excuse to weave a lot of it in through. They quite cleverly make one of the characters, Cat's friend, whose character name I've forgotten. Is it Cat's friend? Who's into Shakespeare?
Yeah, it's Cat's friend. Yeah.
So apparently the reason there's not as much of her in the movie, I'll try and weave some of the trivia in now, so I don't have to do it later. Apparently Cat's friend was originally in the movie more. But she made a lot of references, or the original script at least was much darker, and she was like referenced like constant attempts at suicide. And apparently someone thought that was funny. I mean, it's funny that they thought that was funny. My laughter now is at the idea that anyone ever thought that would be an acceptable joke.
Yeah.
But they took it out, which wisely. At some point, someone went, not appropriate. Let's not do that. And they removed it from the movie. And I guess that's why she doesn't get as much play as the other friend. Actually, no, I think she gets more play than the other friend in the end. Because she ends up with that like relationship with the
with Cameron's friend.
With I know the actor David Krumholtz. I don't Michael. I think his character's called Michael.
Yeah, they were the two. Yeah, because I suppose Bianca's got a friend, hasn't she, as well? But yeah, when I was referring to friends earlier, it was Cameron's and the Shakespeare fan. Because I just love that they took the time to do that.
Yeah. But they did this. Really but cool. They did exactly the same thing with Bianca, because Bianca's got a friend too who ends up with the douche with Joey.
Yeah, that one's a bit odd. That I think you could level again as a slight criticism of some of the threads not being quite tied up, because they're clearly meant to be the best of friends. And she's like, oh, you can have him. And they seem to fall out like really easily. And it's never sort of addressed, explained, rectified. Like,
yeah, I think the idea was just like the idea that she's leaving that behind now, like that vapid sort of.
Which is great, yeah.
It is an unresolved character thing, but in terms of the actual story of the movie,
she moves on.
It's the scene exists not to set up or resolve her relationship with her friend. It more exists to show us, the audience, her growth. And I think that's because I think the version of that character at the beginning of the movie, before she'd gone through any of the lessons she learns in the film, she would have been jealous, upset. I wanted to go out with the model, but instead she's like, "Oh no, you can absolutely have him. I've learned my lesson. That guy was not all he was like cracked up to be."
Those four especially do go on, and even like Kat's friend and Cameron's friend, they all go on a journey, even if like they're not all as like. For me, I think one of my favourite relationship stories in here, if not potentially my favourite relationship story, isn't actually any of the couples. It's Bianca and Kat's story, and the way they evolve to accept each other, and kind of they just by the end they see their affection for each other is more transparent by the end of the movie.
And credit to the film as well for putting as much focus on the female characters as the male, because my memory of this era of these sort of teen films was that the male characters were the focus, chasing the female characters who didn't get much screen time other than scenes with the male characters pursuing them. And absolute credit to this film.
All scenes where they're like crying up, like Road Trip. The only scenes that don't involve the guys is crying over the guys, or Whereas this in a way, I haven't done the maths, but I'd be willing to bet Bianca and Kat get more screen time probably than the guys.
I think
certainly
that's probably
Bianca
true.
probably gets more screen time than Cameron, and Kat gets more screen time than Patrick, maybe, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, and like their relationship is probably the one that goes through the most journey. They get the most focus in terms of and that sisterly relationship and how that unfolds is actually pretty well done. That moment at the end,
very real, I think.
Well, yeah, and I think the moment in the end where it's actually probably the best structured relationship as well, because as we were saying earlier, it's a bit messy with the other relationships where it's like, oh, I'm mad at you, now we're together again. Now I'm mad at you, now I'm together again, because this movie's got to keep going. Whereas their relationship actually goes on a much cleaner, clearer character arc. They both stand by their positions until a certain amount of things happen, and then they change their minds based on the circumstances. So for Kat's character, for Julia Stiles' character, it's the moment where she finally decides to help her sister out by going to prom, because she understands her sister desperately wants to go to prom, even though she doesn't. And then it means, and at that point you know how much it means to Bianca to be able to go to prom, and you know exactly how much it means to Kat, or will cost Kat personally, to go to prom. And yet she's making that sacrifice for her sister, and you understand that. And then they really just fucking swoosh 3 points, through the net, clean sweep. Then they have this great scene where they acknowledge that, like afterwards, after the prom, where Bianca approaches Kat and says, "Thank you. I appreciate that," and that's a really nice moment.
And what I love is that's a good example of the song of the movie missing out scenes that don't need to be there and making decisions on, well, what do we need? So we see Kat looking out at Bianca, looking sad on a swing, which is better than that description of the scene. And then in the next scene, they're going to prom. And you could go, well, we didn't. That's a shame. We didn't get to see the moment where she tells her they're actually going to go. But the scene at the end where she says thank you is so much better and more interesting than that scene would have been. That scene would have been, fine, I'll go, and yeah. And you didn't need that.
No.
And I just think that's a good example of, right, that scene's not in there, but actually for the better. So yeah,
no, 100% agree, and I think because that scene also would have deprived of us the humor, deprived us of the humor of the moment when she comes down in the dress and the dad's all confused, which is a great moment, which is like a surprisingly good scene. So that is missing out moments in a cleverer way, where you actually benefit from missing out the link in that chain, because you allow the audience to fill in that blank, because it's an obvious blank. We know what it is. But we gain a good joke out of it in the scene where they come down and surprise the dad we're actually going to prom. And then, of course, I've lost the train of thought completely. That was weird.
You get the scene at the end.
Yeah, you get the scene at the end on the bench instead, which is I would argue elevates that relationship. So I mean, it's interesting. Like, what was underserved? The relationships between the guys and the girls. What was served correctly? The relationships with the girls, which is again just a sign of this film. A sign of this film, sort of.
Slightly being ahead of its time.
Yeah, in some ways, I think so, and I think
standing out, and it's other films unfortunately weren't doing that.
And it's things like not removing the misogyny is kind of still basically present, but they frame it differently. That's why they get away with it. So the premise of, that's the undateable sister, that's the dateable sister, is there, but the characters all learn that that's wrong as the movie goes on. So it's the only character that doesn't learn anything in this movie is the arsehole, right? Like the model guy whose name I keep forgetting, Joey. His character is the only character that learns nothing in this movie, top to bottom. Yeah. But he's kind of the villain. Like he's an antagonist in this movie, so that's okay. He can continue to have incorrect feelings and thoughts about stuff. And they even go to a lot of trouble to try and characterize his relationship with Kat, because they actually established that there was a brief moment when Kat and Joey were actually kind of a thing for a very small period of time.
And you get that vibe without ruining. You get that vibe without it being incredibly obvious throughout the movie. They
Correct.
take the time to show you that there is a disdain, and then they explain why at the end.
Yeah, and I think what's great about that is that explains Kat's sort of not antisocial, but her sort of strong-headedness that leads to her being a bit ostracized by the rest of the school. So you get the impression a lot of that started around the time that she had that very brief relationship and then fall out with him, and you go, he soured her on humanity. Yeah, that makes sense. He's a dickhead. It makes perfect sense that arsehole would have been at least the catalyst for her sort of, doing that. And I think as well, it's like, I think both female characters in this end up being pretty good female role models. I think they're both strong-headed, but not in the again movies of this era way of being like, these women are such a problem. Can't they just lighten up? Look, those guys are having fun. Not in that way, but they're both completely. They have agency. They have minds of their own. They'll make choices on their own, and for their own reasons.
As you were talking about earlier, it's them. How easy would it have been? You could have easily, and it would have made sense, it would have fit the story, and it would have been fine. You could have easily had Cameron punch Joey at the end, And that's
Yes!
Cameron rising up
So,
and going
yeah,
and gaining the confidence and going no, but they don't do that. They
So-
have Bianca punch him.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, at the end when Joey finds out that this whole time he'd been paying Heath Ledger's character to go out with Julia Stiles' character so he could take Bianca to the prom, and in the end she goes with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, and he shows up and he insults her. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character does stand up for her, but he gets knocked on his ass basically. And then when Joey turns around, Bianca is there, having seen him insult her. And then when the guy she's with the prom with then got knocked down, so she just throws punch after punch. She just like, and every
she even
punch
says that.
Yeah.
She says like, "This
Yeah.
is for my sister, and this is for hurting my date." Like they even put the dialogue in to say this is her getting revenge on what he's done to him.
So surprisingly, and this is the first time we've said this, I think, of any of the films we've done, I think, and this one was the most susceptible to it because it was based on a play that's been labelled misogynistic. This is probably the most like passable like thing we've watched from the 90s without any real like problematic content. The closest we have is a couple of kisses that we would argue were a little bit like, you didn't give enough signals that could have been wanted. Other than that, which is, I mean, that's, you could just say, oh, it's just a passionate kiss, like he just leaned in out of nowhere. Like you could argue that's like, you know, a romantic thing if both characters are on board.
Because when he does it, when he does it at the end, she actually responds to it, and when he does it at another point, there's a few incidents of it. There's one where she clearly doesn't want to kiss him. Yeah. There are other points where it happens when the person, they are in a relationship.
Yeah.
There they are. Yeah.
But beyond that one, you know,
not saying it's still right, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, that there is, with that one tiny thing in it. This film was come out remarkably unscathed in 2019 eyes. Like, unless I've completely missed something, and if I have, I apologize. But I think, I mean, God knows there's probably some undercurrent of transphobia or something, and I've missed it like an idiot. Like, I hope not. I didn't see anything in this movie that was problematic, and I'm really glad. Like, I'm impressed, to be honest with you, Chris, because again, I was really expecting something with a lot of gross out humor, a lot of kids at parties doing stupid shit, like no real character development, no real interesting plot beyond they're together. Oh, he's fucked up. She's mad at him. Then he's impressed her again. And there is a little bit of that in there because that's a part of the genre. But holy hell!
Even then, it's done very quickly. Like it's not drawn out. Like it really. No. There's that amazing scene with the poem, which is brilliant.
We should talk about that scene. Really, that
fantastic.
Scene. So. There are two standout scenes in this whole movie that, like, I think I could imagine them being iconic. Having never seen this movie until yesterday, I don't know if they are, but I'm willing to bet they are. And I think number one is him singing at the stadium.
That is considered iconic, yeah.
And I think the reason that's iconic, if I'm being honest, is probably because it doesn't. It's out of character in the best possible way. So we talked earlier about some characters acting in a way that doesn't make sense for the character, and you kind of go, oh, it's weird that you've just suddenly changed your mind on that because we've not seen any evidence to show why you would do that. But here is an example of it working to its advantage, because you understand through his performance, not through the script, that he is starting to genuinely fall for her. His interactions with her, you can see that he is genuinely starting to be into her. So when he gets given the money the final time, I think you sort of understand now that he's in it for realsies. But
definitely
you can't imagine the character doing a big grand romantic gesture like singing at the stadium, having a whole marching band go, which is what he arranges. But when it happens, because it's just about been established that he's genuinely into her, you go, okay, this is surprising, but it's also fits what I've learned about the character from the performance. So it's like, it's that right combination of you're never going to see it coming because it seems really out of character, but it is just about justified through his performance earlier in the movie. And then when it happens, and he gives 110% to that, by the way. Like the singing, the dancing, like it's incredibly shot. Like, it's done brilliantly, and he's incredible, and he's like, and actually, there's a moment when he's running along and he's got his legs out in front of him, and he's sort of doing sort of a silly run, like, across the thing, and I was like,
it's brilliant.
I could totally see somebody watching that and going, he's the Joker.
Yeah,
it's such a physical performance, like, and he puts so much into it. I was 100% on board in it, and I think it does mostly work because it's unexpected but still functions, and that is very pleasant. And the second scene, I imagine, is iconic, and we should absolutely talk about it. Is the poem, is the soliloquy, whatever you want to call it, at the end, the verse written by Kat's character, which is the inspiration for the title of the film, 10 Things I Hate About You. It's apparently questionable if there are exactly 10 things in there, but I read that in the trivia. I didn't put that into my trivia that I was going to read out at the end of this, but apparently that's in there. Apparently some people have debated what counts, what doesn't, and whether it's actually 10 things. I don't think it matters.
No, the film wouldn't have the ring to it if it was 7 Things I Hate About You. The tiny element of that poem that I love the most, and I think it does so much for the scene, is she says, "I hate that you didn't call," and without that, you could go, this is like, she was angry with him, and now she's like, expressing all this love and stuff. But you put that in, and you're like, fucking hell, she was always willing to listen to him. She did always believe him. She's still pissed off and upset because he didn't make any effort to reach out. And then when it's so clever, because then when she sees the guitar, you could also go, oh, well, that was quite a quick fix. I'd argue 2 things. One, in a movie where, as you said, you can see the obvious beats, I don't think a quick fix is necessarily a bad thing. But 2, the guitar shows that he was sorry and he was thinking about her, and he did do something about it, even though he didn't call her. Like, he's expressed it in a different way. It all makes sense, and it's not something that you'd necessarily notice without analysing it deeply, but it's really clever. Like,
yeah. And one thing I wish, though, they had done is demonstrated that he bought the guitar immediately. We don't know when he bought the guitar. I like the idea better that he bought her the guitar with the money before she found out about the money.
Yeah, because there's a moment, the next, because I knew the ending, and I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying this, because I remember watching it last night going, that's clever, is when he gets the last, like, 300 quid, or the guy's like, oh, I'll do 300 quid, and he kind of goes, and he accepts it, but he tentatively accepts it.
Yeah.
You can see there's something in the back of his mind. The next shot is a pan across the guitar shop, and it's the guitar, and I'm like, oh, it's almost as if he's already begun to think, I'll use the money for her.
Yeah, but I would have liked to have seen that.
Yes,
I think you would. I think that moment at the end. So for those who don't remember, let's just to clarify this. So they fall out at prom because she finds out that he was originally being paid to take her out, and it is a bit stereotypical. It's that, yeah, it started as that, but now I'm here for you, which, we've seen that a million times. It's nothing special, but it's done reasonably well here. So she falls out with him, and then the next day they go to class, we get that moment where we find out exactly how she feels about him now, and she just there's an assignment in class to do like a poem or something. It's related to Shakespeare actually, and she does this passage that's like all the things she hates about him essentially, and one of them is I hate you didn't call, which is, as Chris pointed out, brilliant, just very clever, because it shows that she still cares, and she hates that she wants to like him. She hates that she still loves him. She hates that, like, because she wants to be mad because she's found out that the reason he took her out initially was money. And there's a scene earlier in the movie where you see her. She goes into a guitar shop and has a guitar, and he's sort of weirdly stalking her and sees her on the guitar. They've already set up that, and then when she leaves the class and goes to her car, the guitar is in the car, and she's like, "You bought this for me?" And he's like, "Fucking too right, I did." And then she gives him a kiss, and it's like, happy ending, right? That's the structure of it. The problem, I think, with that, not the problem, a little bit the problem, is I don't think that's as powerful, the idea that he fucked up, and then he went out of guilt and bought her a guitar. That doesn't work as well for me. And in my head, I've settled this as, No, he already bought her the guitar. The reason he took that final amount of money, because he goes, no, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm out. Like, there's a person here, and he's making the right choice. But then the guy ups the money to 300, and he then takes it. I think what we needed there is something concrete to show him, to indicate that he was buying the guitar at that moment in time, not out of guilt the day after.
Yeah, and you maybe could have done it where you have either a scene where she goes to the guitar shop before prom, and it's not there.
Oh, that's very clever. Yes, because I was just thinking about that structurally. How do you do it? Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah,
the
or
answer.
you have her say, "You're the one that brought it. This hasn't been in the shop for a week," or you weave it in that way, and he's like, "Yeah, I brought it before prom. I brought it, whatever."
Yeah, yeah.
Or you have him at prom say, "Look, come out to the car. I've got something to show you." You have him say, "Well, look,
Yeah, but then of course, then they fall out before he gets to do that, so then he can use it the next day instead.
Yeah, you basically have him. There's some line of dialogue in the prom which is him saying, "I can show you that I actually care. Let me explain. Let me show you something." Something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one last thing I want to touch on. Well, no, there's a couple, two or three very quick things, and we'll get to the trivia. First of all, apparently, this is me again trying to weave in trivia, so I don't have to do it later. Julia Stiles did that in one take, the poem.
Oh wow!
And that was the take. And there was nothing in the script about tears, and she just did it, and it is stunning. It's honestly,
it's a great piece of acting.
I talk about elevating a film out of fucking nowhere. I mean, she's good in this movie. Again, I don't want to feel I'm disparaging anyone. Obviously, I mentioned already that Heath Ledger stands out the whole movie, top to bottom. It's just constant, like how it looks like he's acting everyone off the page, even other very good actors, including Julia Stiles, who is great in this. But fuck me, mate, that last scene, Jesus, she is on fire. That is a hell of a performance. Everything from the way her nostrils flare and you can see her eyes like twitching and like she half smiles but then it dies in her mouth and you can see it. Honestly, I watched it 3 times because
it's a great scene.
I kept going back. I was no longer listening to the words. I was just watching her because it's such a great, honest performance. So there's I just want to make sure I give enough credit here for that scene because it's absolutely astounding on every level. It's like it's acting on another level, and honestly, it's well above the quality of this film. And a lot of the acting is from Ledger as well in this movie. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. You do not need to give that much to a film of this nature because again, these films
everyone cared.
Everyone did. It's true, 100%. Everyone gave their all, successful or not. Like they were just like, whether what they were like. We don't even like because at this point they wouldn't have even known this would have been a surefire hit, like they would have done after American Pie. Because as we established, this came out around the time of American Pie. Is that right? Did we figure that out last week?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So this wasn't even when this was guaranteed money. This is just before that, like a second before that happened. Like so they were just doing it like. Yeah, it's incredible. Like, it's genuinely incredible. And then the other thing I want to bring up, and it's not as powerful a point to end on as that, but I do want to briefly talk about the adults in this movie, like that particularly her teacher, the teacher that gives her when he keeps kicking her out of the class.
Yeah, the English teacher. I was literally, my last point was we can't get to Triv without talking about the English teacher.
Yeah, what's his deal? It's incredible. So basically,
it's
clear that she's basically, through her sort of strong-headedness and and sort of being very like pointing out how everything's problematic and like being very kind of angry at society or whatever, she's clearly made his life hell for a while, and so he kicks her out in the movie at the lightest of like. At one point, he's like, "So this is the assignment." She's like, "I like the assignment." He's like, "Oh really?" She's like, "Yeah, no, I'm really excited to do this one." He's like, "Get out of my class, fuck off!" Like,
and he's so thrown by her being nice.
Yeah.
his whole thing, just the way he's like, you're pissing me off. And like, why don't you tell the school that maybe they should buy a book by a black man? And the two like wannabe Jamaicans are like, yeah, man. He's like, don't even get me started on you two. Like,
Yeah,
so
they do
funny.
that. Yeah, they touch on a weird phenomenon
So
that genuinely happened in the 90s, which is probably the thing that dates the movie the most, I think, which is that idea of sort of like white dudes who think they're Bob Marley, basically. That was a weird trend that existed for a period of time, and the actual black guy being like, "Don't even get me started. You guys are a mess."
But again, unique tone. This film has different groups of people, but it doesn't have the jocks. It doesn't have the cheerleaders. It doesn't have the computer geeks.
They even do the scene where one guy walks a new kid around and explains who they all are. But again, it wasn't rock kids, jocks, cheerleaders, all that stuff. No, it was, these are the business kids. These are all the kids that are going to grow up and run businesses. Like these are the white dudes who are a bit too much into Bob Marley and weed and all have dreadlocks. Like this is this group, this is that group, and they were all quite unusual groups. And I agree. Like, and again, ahead of even that becoming a trope, I think a little bit. Subverting a trope before it became a trope. It's very bizarre.
But we've moved away from the adults. The adults are all hilarious, and it's brilliant. And that dude in particular gives a genius performance.
Yeah, it's
He's
funny.
so funny.
He's really funny, but there is a part of me that's just like, what world is this that they live in? Like, because they always say the writer crafts their ideal world, and I think there's a truth to that, because everything in the scripts I write, everyone speaks in clever monologues. But I guess I don't know what the ideal world of this writer is, other than just like, once you're an adult, you can be as much of a dick as you like without consequences. Because in real life, if a teacher was just kicking kids out of class for just asking questions, they'd be fired. He's so mean to these kids.
But it's so clever, because it helps you. It helps you feel more for the kids, because it's like, well, you can't go to any adult for help.
No,
so
and it also,
no wonder you know.
And in the weird reality this movie creates, you sort of go, oh, all the adults are messed up because they've all been through this like the kids have. Like, it's such a weird reality they've crafted. It's such an offbeat reality, because it's like, it's so close to our reality, but it's just something slightly offbeat about the way people talk to each other and interact with each other, and it's like, oh, no wonder all the adults are messed up. This is what growing up in this world is like.
And I have to say, the other adult thing, the fact that the mum has left adds so much texture to it without becoming a focus for the sake of being a focus, or without becoming a storyline where you'd kind of suspect where it's going to go.
Yes.
It's beautifully subtle. It's a decision that adds a lot of, I guess, preconceptions, and when you hear that, you fill in some of the blanks yourself. But they don't make it about that at any point. They make it about who the characters are, and that's part of who the characters are. And again, an incredibly clever decision.
Yeah, 100%. And one last other thing as well. I was building to a point earlier, and I completely got sidetracked by something else. The Shakespeare thing, very clever to make Kat's friend be into Shakespeare and make that a plot for why Cameron's friend was going after her, because it allowed them to get a bunch more Shakespeare references into this than they would have done otherwise, in a way that felt natural and didn't feel completely forced in, because it's an adaptation of Taming of the Shrew. Anyway.
But it gives Cameron a happy ending. Like, literally everyone apart from the jock gets the happy ending.
One little point that's just occurred to me about Cameron: the movie opens with him in the guidance counsellor's office, and they set it up as if he's going to be some sort of problem kid. Oh, army brat, you're going to be an issue. Get out of my face! Like, and they don't.
Got the feeling that was more
that up. What's the point of that scene?
To make it clear that he's the new kid was my impression.
Yeah, but just okay. You've just
to justify him.
God,
him coming in because it's so near prom. You have to do something to explain why there's a new kid joining school 2 weeks before prom, which is presumably the end of that term.
Yeah, but like your parents moved. You're a new kid. Cool. I wouldn't have questioned that.
Yeah.
Like, they don't need to make
Yeah,
him an army brat, because army brat has this other connotation though of kids who can't settle down because they're constantly moving. The idea of the army brat character type, certainly in movies, and what it normally communicates to you, is a person who's not willing to make friendships and long-lasting relationships because they know they're moving again in 6 months' time. That's usually the connotation of an army brat kid, because those kids get moved around a lot. But so like this idea that like, you know, and they have no consequences. They can fuck up at the school because it doesn't matter. They're going to a new school in 6 months too. So it was a weird choice. I know you're right. They were just trying to start. I think that's what that must be it. They were just trying to establish he's new, but do it a different way. Because I'm going, oh, okay. So his character is going to be, it could be a romantic plot for his character, but it's like, but I'm probably going to be gone in 6 months' time. So the dude, you know, is this even worth pursuing? But instead, it was he could have just been the new kid. Like, put him in the office with that lady. She's like, right, you're a new kid. You're coming in halfway through the year. Good luck dealing with those lot, and then chuck him out onto the thing, and it would have been the exact same movie, and it would have probably established it a lot cleaner. It's a weird choice. Anyway, all right. Josh Gordon-Levitt very good in this movie as well. By the way, we haven't really talked about him, but he's
No, we really didn't, but he is great in it.
Yeah, he's reliable. All the cast actually, just top to bottom, really good. No one does a bad job here. Andrew Keegan obviously is Joey the douchebag. Yeah, he's great. I'm trying to think who else was in this movie. Obviously David Krumholtz as Michael. I love him every time. I don't really know the actress that played Bianca very well, but apparently at one point she was like the teen, like the ideal, like she was listed as like, you know your next girl next door. Like she was supposed to be, she was on track to, and she was very successful. She did a lot of really good stuff apparently, including this. Obviously Alison Janney, always worth watching.
Always amazing.
I think that's everyone. I think we've covered most of the cast. Anyway,
yeah, they were all brilliant, and again, the music, the costume design,
all top notch.
All of that stuff added.
So I'm saying before you get to the trivia very quickly, I'm saying recommend. I think people should go back and watch this. I think it's a good movie. It's not a perfect movie. There's a lot of structural issues, some weird character stuff, but like you totally overlook it because it's funny and clever and well written and well acted on the whole.
I think there is more clever stuff with the script than flaws actually.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, and the flaws are just the sort of flaws inexperienced writers, and I think that is the case. I think this was the first movie they wrote. I think the people who wrote this then went on to write Legally Blonde.
Oh wow,
which is a movie my girlfriend insists we do on this at some point. Which I'm fine with. It's not a bad movie at all. It's a fun movie.
Yeah, I can't really remember it. I have seen it, but I can't really remember it.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with it as well. But we'll come back to that. So anyway, let's get to some trivia very quickly. So Heath Ledger apparently improvised the moment where Patrick starts playing with fire. That sounds about right.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, he improvised the clapping in Dark Knight. So
yeah,
it makes sense to me that he would have some weird character stuff he adds. He actually beat out Josh Hartnett and Ashton Kutcher for the role of Patrick, which is incredible because, like,
they were the hot young things at this point.
They really were, and apparently there was some concern about his Australian accent. But apparently the director was behind it and thought it gave him sort of, made it feel dangerous and sexy, but also kind of mysterious. So like
I completely agree.
So yeah, so they liked that about it. Obviously the entire film was shot using completely real locations. No sets were used. I had a question though. You know the scene where they're on the little pedalo things?
Yeah, that looked like green screen to me.
Okay, right, me too. Okay, fine, I'm not crazy. There's nothing about that in the trivia, I was hoping, but apparently otherwise it's completely real and shot that way.
Cool.
According to the 10th anniversary commentary by the cast, Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles did begin dating during the filming. They broke up a year later, in year 2000. Apparently, it was Julia Stiles who suggested Frankie who is that? Who wrote that song? I don't even know. Frankie Valli's? Can't Take My Eyes Off You, to be sung by Heath Ledger on the football field.
Oh, cool.
There was a different song originally chosen, which is, I think, further down in my trivia. I was supposed to reorganize the trivia, so that was with this one, but I can't find it now. It'll come up later. I've got it somewhere down. Oh yeah, we didn't talk about this scene at all. We probably should have, so this is a good excuse. The table dance scene is what led to Julia Stiles landing the lead role in Save the Last Dance.
Oh wow.
It's a good dance. She's
yeah.
It's almost too good because you sort of go like, oh, this is the shut-in girl that's socially shunned, and yet she's like busting out some moves.
Yeah, it did. I don't know. I mean, I suppose the drink, but I suppose they justify it. But it is completely. It is.
Yeah,
that is a very out of left field moment when
to
it happens.
catch up people who haven't seen the movie recently. There's the moment midway through the movie where they go to that party we described earlier. Julia Stiles' character gets quite drunk and starts dancing on a table. It feels out of left field for her character, but like it leads to some of the good stuff later in the script, so it kind of justifies it. But yeah, it's a fun scene if nothing else, and I like the classroom scene the next day with that teacher again.
Yeah, definitely
giving them shit about what they did at the weekend. It's quite funny.
Yeah.
So anyway,
yeah, and he's like, unless she beat your ass, I don't want to hear about it.
yeah, it's great. So the Letters to Cleo's lead singer Kay Hanley told Pop Dose that the experience actually weirdly scared the band, and they had to perform the song on a patch of roof the size of a kitchen on a windy day. She added,
I mean, it does look terrifying, to be fair.
yeah, it does. And like she says, it's a helicopter shot, and they told her it would cost $500,000 every time that helicopter took off. So don't fuck it up. And then she said, we started playing and we saw the helicopter appear off in the distance. It's hard to say how far away it was at first because we were so high up in the air. But then all of a sudden, the helicopter did this dive bomb directly towards us. And they wondered, is it out of control? Is it supposed to be coming at us like this? But they kept thinking, we can't fuck it up. Can't fuck it up. It costs too much. So they kept going. And that's the shot they used. And she did add,
tell you though,
it was unbelievably scary, but it turned out to be such an amazing shot. So there you go.
But also, like that, I mean, they'd have made some money and got some recognition from this.
Oh, 100%. Well worth doing.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, like I know of the band still as a result of this movie,
100%
solely.
Yeah, 100%. Cameron says, "I burn, I pine, I perish," which is a direct quote from Taming of the Shrew.
Yes.
Several names reflect Shakespearean origin, of course. Bianca and Kat's names are from the original text, but of course their surname Stratford is where Shakespeare was born. Stratford upon Avon. Patrick's last name.
Oh, nice.
Patrick's last name is Verona, which is the birthplace of the character Petruchio, but also is links to Romeo and Juliet, I believe. The high school is called Padua, which is the name of the city the play is set. So the school is the location of the original play. And we've already covered that Kat and Bianca, their names are directly from the thing. The marching band sequence in which Heath Ledger sings to Julia Stiles was not from the high school the rest of the film was shot. They had to approach a different stadium.
I really thought you were going to say the marching band sequence is not from the original play, The Taming of the Shrew. And I was like, yep.
No, it was not shot at most of it was shot at the same school, basically, but they had to find a completely different location for that scene. I'm not sure 100% why. And they actually got the legit marching band of, I think they're called Lincoln High School, which was like a nearby high school, and used their stadium and actually used their band as well. Several members of the stadium band assisted, and actually the guy he hands the money to they have a quick shot of Heath Ledger's character handing someone the money before that scene happens, and the guy he hands the money to is not an actor but is from that marching band.
What's amazing about that is, and I don't know whether this was done deliberately then, but you don't, because thinking about it, it is massive, and you might think, but they do that shot of the guy on the motorbike, on the moped thingy, veering off of the car park and falling down, which is a really funny, again, really nice shot. But it also goes, just in case you're thinking, is that stadium part of the school? Here's how it is. Here's the route. Here's
the way out.
Don't worry.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is so clever.
True. So the original song scripted for Patrick to sing was "I Think I Love You" by the Partridge Family. Apparently they were a bit stuck because then it got used in Scream 2 in like 97, which is like the year before this was filmed. Okay. That was what was in the script, which is why I guess it was then Julia Stiles could then make a suggestion, because that was I was supposed to put that trivia with the other song-related trivia further up, but I forgot. I've already mentioned, of course, that Heath Ledger drew on Richard Burton's portrayal of in the 1967 version, and apparently he decided to give him a Jack Nicholson edge with cheekiness and smiles. And I find that interesting because, of course, Jack Nicholson, of course, also played the Joker. Very fascinating. During a Q&A with the screenwriters, they revealed where the title came from. The title is based on a diary entry I made during high school, said Karen McCullough. I had a boyfriend named Anthony that I was frequently unhappy with. I made a list called Things I Hate About Anthony. When Kristen, who's the other writer, and I decided to write this, when I got through all of my high school, I went through all of my high school diaries to bone up on my angsty memories. And when I told her about this list, she was like, "That's our title." It turns out her ex-boyfriend Anthony actually likes the movie, and she says he's very proud of that fact. We're still friends today, and every now and then I get a random phone call in the middle of the night. My nephew doesn't believe that the title is about me. Tell him. And then she'll add, "Yes, I hated Anthony in high school." That's great.
That's great.
Yeah, I like that one. When Jill Junger, who's the director of this, agent gave him. No, that's a him. I assumed it was a lady that directed this from the name Jill, but it's a guy. Oh, it's Gil. I read it wrong. That's why. When Gil got the script for a teen version of Taming of the Shrew, he said absolutely not. He admitted in the film's production notes, "I had no interest in doing a typical high school film. I wanted to do a romantic love story. But at the urging of my agent, I read the script and I loved it. The depth of it surprised me. It's a really romantic love story. The plot is beautifully interwoven and the humor works because it comes from the characters." I would agree.
Yeah, I would too.
I could see somebody being told, "Oh, it's a high school version of Taming the Shrew," and then immediately a director going, "Absolutely not."
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Fuck that. So yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. Apparently, this is an interesting one. So Julia Stiles originally auditioned for the role of Bianca, because they're actually only a couple months apart in age, her and the other actress that ended up playing Bianca. So Julia Stiles auditioned for Bianca, and the Bianca actress really, really wanted to play Kat.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, they just felt it was better to swap them round, even though, the actress has auditioned. Well, I don't know. It's unclear if Larissa Olinek auditioned for Kat ever, but she ended up as Bianca, and obviously Julia Stiles, who literally auditioned for Bianca, got Kat. It's not really clear what the thinking was here in this. I'd be interested in asking them why that got switched around. And then, if both actresses were gunning for the other roles initially, why not? Why wouldn't you swap it round?
Yeah. I think it. Well, I mean, I think it does work better the way it is.
Well, it's hard to say though, isn't it? Because you got to see them playing the roles they were supposed to be playing well. If it had been swapped round, it would have. They probably could have. I imagine they're capable enough to do it, but it's interesting to see how that might have turned out. Yeah, and then after Michael is nearly hit by Kat, he does refer to her as the Shrew, which is a direct reference to Taming of the Shrew, the play this is based on. There we go. Trivia done. What are we? So where are we? Where are we at? I think it's it. I think it's the one. I think it's. I think that's a recommendation. I'm pleasantly surprised.
I'd absolutely recommend it.
Yeah. So what have we had? We've had 2 recommendations now out of our 5 films.
Yeah, quick change in this, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would still obviously recommend Short Circuit, and you would still recommend Mouse Hunt. Neither of us would particularly recommend Space Jam. The ones we've both agreed are worth your time are Quick Change in 10 Things I Hate About You.
Quick change in this. Yeah, absolutely. So which leads us nicely, Dan. What are we doing next week, my friend?
Right, so I was thinking about continuing the theme of films that we are that are a bit more adult. And this one's a really interesting one because I saw this one far too young. I referenced this last week or the week before. RoboCop.
Interesting.
It's an extremely gory film. It's got a huge amount of political and social satire in it. It was an 18 everywhere. I saw it at the age of about 8. So
nice.
I definitely shouldn't have. I'm 100% saying that now, but my parents had no idea what that movie contained, and I think it's shaped a lot of my, because you go back through our history on this podcast going back to 2012. There's been a constant theme of me always wanting to watch up when I was a kid. So I watched things that were aimed at age groups above mine. It's why I got into sitcoms so young. It's why I was watching Friends at the age of like 9 or 10. Do you know what I mean? It's because I was, and I think my interest in content also aimed at grown-ups where I wasn't being talked down to. I think that comes from specifically things like RoboCop. So I think it's a surprisingly influential one for me. So I guess And have you? I actually don't know. Have you ever seen it?
I have never seen it, no. But it has a lot of film critics that I trust describe RoboCop as a perfect film.
It pretty much is. I think
it has been fought on movie fights, for example, many times as the answer for what is a perfect film. So I'm very intrigued and excited to watch it.
Yeah, it's a classic for a reason. I'm also very interested to see what you think of it. So there you go. So come back in a week's time for RoboCop, or assuming that we recorded it promptly enough, which might not be the case, but do check. There's a chance, depending on our recording schedule, it'll be up early on the Patreon, as every other episode has been so far. So go subscribe on there for as little. For as little as $1 a month, you can get access to that. It helps us out, helps cover the server costs for when we put the other content on through our provider Libsyn onto like iTunes and stuff. Those costs are quite high. So
yeah, our main thing, like, we don't
break even.
Like for us, Patreon, it's not necessarily about making money. We would just break even is the goal.
And since we launched this, we've lost 3 patrons. Because basically by putting content on the Patreon, we reminded people we exist, and they went, "Oh, am I still paying?" Nope. So, thanks. We thought putting content up would gain us patrons. In fact, it's lost us patrons. We'd have been better off leaving it as it was. Who knew? So if you can help us out, that's great. But on top of that, obviously, you can get some of the content early, which we'll continue to do as often as we can. We don't know. We're not like we got quite ahead early on, so it was really easy for me to pre-release the content. It's going to get trickier now at this stage because we're recording a bit more close to when this is going up, but as long as I can figure out a way to do it, I will continue to do that.
Yeah, cool. Mm-hmm. So there you go. Thank you very much. Like and subscribe in all the usual places, as Dan has said. YouTube.com/nothing but static.
Nothing but static UK.
Without UK. Nothing but static, but without the G on Twitter. Facebook, nothing but static. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Have we done Twitter? I'm at Dan Doolan. Chris is at C Billingham. 2 M's. Don't bother tweeting Chris. He won't reply. He doesn't look.
My cousin used that amazingly the other day. We were talking about whether we'd take our partners' names when getting married, and I was like, "Well, it's difficult for me because, like, you know, the podcast and stuff. Like my name is out there." And he was like, "Fuck off." He was like, "What? You're not being sexist, are you? You're not going to take our name because of your brand? Is that what it is? Your branding? C Billingham with 2 M's?" Like, I was like, "Oh, good point." Yep, I sound like a knob. And he really went for it. And like basically like 15 minutes after the conversation ended, he went, "Oh, that was fun." And I went, "What?" And he went, "Well, I had the same conversation with a mate the other day, and this time I've had time to construct arguments." He's like, "I was in exactly your position a week ago." Like, just taking the abuse. It's like, cheers.
Fantastic.
But
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
right.
Chris, you should take your partner's name. It's you be a sexist if you don't.
I don't know if that would automatically make me sexist. Not, but
just saying. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening. I'll let go. It's Chris ends this one. Sorry, I'll back off. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes.
You can end it. You just can't remember what we say. So.
No, I can't. You need
Until
to
you remember it, I'll do it.
No.
I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.